Good afternoon, friends. John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about another album that, in my view, is a main reason of why I'm doing what I'm doing right now, why I review music, albums that inspired me. So far this week, I reviewed Nine Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral, and The Smiths' The Queen is Dead, and I'm here today to talk about another album that truly did inspire me in more ways than one to doing what I do now, and that'll be the legendary David Bowie album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Creative genius, one of the forefathers of alternative rock, and a lifelong obsession of mine, Mr. David Bowie. I mean, getting into his music when I did was mind-blowing to say the very least. I mean, I was absolutely shook by so much of his discography, for lack of a better term, because so many artists over the years have tried to dip their fingers into different sound styles at a pace, kind of like David's, but nobody has come close to being the chameleon that he was, whether it be the glam rock of the early 70s, his experimental late 70s, the new wave of the 80s, his reinvention in the 90s, his career renaissance in the 2000s, and his devastating final album, the Black Star album. Yeah, the man was completely and utterly fearless in music, but whatever decade you're diving into, whatever style you're diving into of David's music, you're going to find something good there. And while his career was just riddled with reinventions and numerous creative outlets, I don't think that it's ever come close to the majesty of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust. This album starts off with 5 Years, which is just one of the truly great intros to an album in rock history. This is a great intro. It's got that nice slow pacing, it's very elegant, it's got all the glam and pizzazz you can want. It's just so glamorous from the word go, and David has always been a master of bringing you into this world that he's created, and he does that from the first moments of this track with his very visual lyrics. No, we are completely ripped into his world very quickly, and we're all patiently awaiting the arrival of Ziggy Stardust himself. And from a distance, it is such a simple track. I mean, it's mostly just pianos, just some strings in the background, as well as tales of the incoming Earth's demise. Only 5 more years, guys. But it's so easy to get swept up in David's performance on this track. That goes double for Soul Love. This track has always been a perennial cult favorite of mine. I just love the warm rhythms of this track and just how soulful it is. It's a little funky, and it's also got one of this album's most universal, easily understandable themes. It's all about love and the power of love, baby. But it's also really sweet from a narrative perspective, as this track is, kind of Ziggy Stardust saying that he will, provide his grace onto Earth, just seeing the amount of love in the world. Love the guitar solo, love the saxophone, just great track all around. And Moon Age Daydream is one of my all-time favorite songs of any genre. I love the wonky lyrics that just seem to continue to get stranger and stranger as this track rolls on. And this is one of a few tracks here that were initially released by Bowie earlier under a side project of a different name. And that's really kind of ironic in this case, because I feel like this track fits this narrative perfectly. This version that we get here, though, is one of the best sounding tracks here. It's almost inspired by metal at points. I love the wailing psychedelic guitar solo. This track almost has like a metal edge to it. I love the psychedelic, hazy production and that Mick Ronson guitar solo. Everything is just so over the top about this track, but nothing seems too much. Starman, there's a reason that it's one of Bowie's best known songs. It's one of the most important tracks he's ever put out, and it's a cornerstone of this album. But it's not just bells and whistles just adding to this narrative that's going nowhere. That's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, it's really classy, really telling, and really emotional. I mean, David's performance here is so incredibly tender and heartfelt. Add in some classy strings and a really iconic acoustic riff, you got a gold track. Oddly enough, I remember It Ain't Easy is probably one of the earliest tracks that I gravitated towards on this track. Oddly enough, It Ain't Easy was one of the first tracks on this album that I really gravitated towards and loved. I love the very artsy, very glamorous, light on the ears instrumental that is all just a massive build up to this gigantic chorus. And oddly enough, also, this is the only cover track on this album, but it really does seem to just fit here. It's got a swagger to it, as well as a ton of character. I mean, I just can't help but get caught up in it every time this chorus rolls around. This track is gigantic, the drama is huge, and this is narratively one of the most important albums ever recorded. I have to confess, if there's any track on here that I've always been a little wishy-washy on, it would be Lady Stardust. And it's a shame because I do love what it does narratively. This is very much the track about Ziggy Stardust's muse. But instrumentally, this is, I think, the weakest track here. But David does salvage it with another really great performance. I also really love Star. I just love the more upbeat, gritty feel to it. The nods to post-punk and proto-punk are very real. The frantic energy here is just really, really great. I love hearing David, freak out a little bit, and it shows our protagonist, Ziggy Stardust, coming to the conclusion that the human race should be saved. A lot of the same feelings on Hang On To Yourself. I love how upbeat and gnarly this track is. There's a little bite to this track, and if Star was David freaking out a little, this is his absolute freak out track. The hypnotic riff, the sense of urgency, and David's most manic performance, it's really thrilling stuff. And it does still fit the narrative, and it has a little bit of sass to it, too. It doesn't get much more narrative-driven than Ziggy Stardust, this album's title track. It's a legendary portrait of a character, apparently sung by the Spiders from Mars, as Ziggy has become too big, bigger than the band itself. It's dramatic, and this is probably the climax of this story, even if it's not the most intense-sounding track. It does have a lot of drama to it. And does it ever hit the spot? And it's just so freaking visual. This paints such a picture. I don't think there's ever been a time in my life where I haven't adored Suffragette City. From the quotable lyrics to the swagger-filled chorus to the really, really weird ragtime pianos just going constantly throughout this track. And it's all about that rock and roll lifestyle and how it's affecting Ziggy Stardust, but it's also the most instantaneous and genuinely catchy track here. It's so glamorous, it's so gaudy, and just so David Bowie. And Rock and Roll Suicide, I don't think that there's a single better track that David could have put here to make for a more fitting end. We've met our dramatic conclusion in so many ways. You just don't hear drama like this anymore. It's the crushing demise and fall of Ziggy Stardust, the glamorous, gaudy demise. And it also not only ends off this album, but it famously marked the end of the Ziggy Stardust persona in real life for David as well. Look into it. It's dramatic, it's tragic, the strings and the horns just keep building throughout this entire track to this incredible conclusion. My God, it's one of the most creative and true narrative-driven albums of all time. It's, soulful, it's got some proto-punk, it's got a ton of character, and so much swagger, and for me, it is a classic. But let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.